Welcome to SBNM is Here, the State Bar of New Mexico's official podcast. In this series, we'll discuss topics such as professional development, tools of the legal trade, and mental and professional well-being. Connecting the legal community across New Mexico, SBNM is here. Hello, everyone, and thank you for tuning into SBNM is Here. So this episode will be a personal inventory, and it's going to be a difficult one at that. So if you have any trigger warnings regarding this topic, or you are on your own journey with grief, please proceed with caution. Our speakers today will talk through the grieving, coping, and healing processes that many people experience when they know someone who has taken their own life. They will also touch upon how to create safety and resiliency in your life or in those you love as a defense mechanism against self-harm. We do recognize that this can be a difficult topic for some, so I want to briefly remind everyone of our Judges and Lawyers Assistance Program. The speakers will, of course, expand more upon this and what they offer, but we also recognize that some of you may not know of or you might be minimally aware of this program, so here's a short overview. The New Mexico Lawyers and Judges Assistance Program, we also refer to it as JLAP, is a free service for all members of the New Mexico Bench and Bar and law students. New Mexico JLAP offers confidential, professional, and peer assistance to help individuals identify and address problems with alcohol and other drugs, depression, and other mental and emotional struggles, as well as with issues related to cognitive impairment. So they really run the full gambit with mental and professional well-being. New Mexico JLAP endeavors to improve the well-being of its members through support and early intervention and to help reduce the public harm caused by impaired members of the legal profession. So with that, we will now hear from the JLAP Director, Pam Moore, and Dr. Avron Kriechman. Pam, take it away.
Well, thank you, Morgan, for that introduction, and hello, everybody. My name is Pam Moore, and I oversee the New Mexico Judges and Lawyers Assistance Program. And today we have on the air or with us Dr. Avron Kriechman. And Dr. Kriechman and myself are going to be talking about the topic of suicide today, and specifically suicide in the legal community. And even though this isn't a topic that a lot of people like to talk about, I think this is a topic that we absolutely have to talk about in the legal community, and especially in New Mexico. So in my 3 years as the JLAP director, I have seen more and heard about more legal professionals taking their own life in the last 6 to 8 months that I have in my 3 years that I've been here. And granted, 3 years isn't a long time, but I'm seeing it a lot more lately. I want to talk to, obviously, Dr. Kriechman and I are going to have a conversation about why that might be happening. It's just something that we can't ignore, that we don't want to put on the back burner and pretend it's not happening. We absolutely, this is an important conversation, and we need to have it. And I think the intent is to help and to support and to educate those that are struggling right now. And whether that be struggling with the death of a loved one, or that be just struggling in general with depression or anxiety and maybe having suicidal thoughts. So we're going to cover a lot of ground today. We're going to try and do all this in an hour. But that's really why JLAP, why I reached out to Dr. Kriechman, who is an expert in this area, and why we're going to be having that conversation today. So I'm going to share just a little bit about Dr. Kriechman, and then I am going to have him also share anything that I miss. He's got a long resume. Like I said, we're so lucky and grateful to have him as an expert and taking the time to talk to us today. So Dr. Kriechman is a child, adolescent, and family psychiatrist at UNM. where he provides training and education to medical and behavioral health students, trainees, and providers. He supervises UNM continuing education in behavioral health at UNM, state, and nationwide. He is a co-principal investigator on the Alliance Building for Suicide Prevention and Youth Resilience, which aims to reduce youth suicide by providing advanced clinical training, as well as bringing together youth and stakeholders to form statewide suicide prevention youth and advisory councils. He's a co-principal investigator on a few other organizations and a certified trainer in a bunch of related practices. And so with that, I would like to say welcome to Dr. Kriechman, and it's an honor to have you here with us today. And is there anything else that I missed that you would like to share with our listeners?
Thanks so much for that kind introduction, Pam. I want to say, first of all, that I really appreciate how the bar is really concerned about all of your welfare and the welfare of your loved ones, and that I and my colleagues in the state and at UNM are more than happy to be of support to you in any way that you feel would be helpful to you. And Pam knows this, and I really appreciate her role in facilitating this connection. Some of you have already reached out to me, and I greatly appreciate you knowing that there are people who are wanting to be of help to you in these very difficult times. It's particularly difficult now because of the pandemic, for the huge stressors that all of us are suffering from. And I don't need to belabor the long list of all of them. I know that you're fully aware of them, but some of them directly relate to why there has been a significant increase in risky behavior, self-injurious behavior, significant mental illness, and substance abuse. And so where I wanted to start is to say that the real focus, and Pam and I have talked about this a lot, is for you to have the tools to understand when things are getting difficult for you and for the people that you are close to. And to feel that you have resources and tools and loved ones and supports and professionals who are all there to promote your safety and your resilience. That's really the focus for all of us all the time, but especially now. So what I wanted to start with is one of the things that Pam and I have talked about is there anything that's relatively unique about being a lawyer or a judge that's unusual as far as stressors? And so I have a bunch of statistics that I won't go into all the details with, but as far as professions that are most likely to lead to people feeling intensely that they are hopeless and that there is nothing short of killing themselves as a solution to all the pain and the suffering that they're experiencing in, lawyers are ranked either 4th or 5th in the country as far as profession for suicide rate. Most studies indicate that at least 40, if not 50% of lawyers suffer from clinical depression even when they start their profession in law school. And so depression, as you might guess, clinical depression, is a significant risk factor for suicide. And another issue that's very prominent is alcohol and substance abuse. That also is unfortunately a significant factor for a lot of people who go into the legal profession because of all the stressors and strains that they go under. By some estimates, the rate of substance abuse and alcohol abuse is twice as high in the legal profession as it is in the general population, depending on the studies. So a lot of people have tried to look at this about why would that be the case for people who are attorneys, especially trial attorneys. Some of them, probably all of them, are very obvious when I list them to you. But one of the things to think about is how during the pandemic, all of those things are quadrupled, if not even more strongly intensified. Long hours, isolation, high stakes in what you do, oftentimes life and death matters, exposure to dire life situations, dealing with people that you want to be helpful to who have great difficulties, both personally and even in relating to other people, including all of you. Oftentimes a competitive environment as opposed to a collaborative and supportive environment. And the intense stigma of society at large as far as people who go into the legal profession. There's a lot of skepticism about the ethics and the reasons that people go into the legal profession. And so there's cultural difficulties. There's also a stigma about talking about vulnerability. That's true in general, but especially in high status professions, that is a huge issue. That to say that you're having difficulty, to say that you're stressed, to say that things are very challenging, much less to say that you're worried about having issues with depression or other kinds of mental challenges, is very much disallowed by society at large and is seen as less than. It won't surprise you that the other professions that are at high risk are my colleagues in medicine. Police are actually at the highest risk because of all the burdens that they carry. And to show vulnerability and uncertainty is not at all permitted by society. Dentists and vets are the other groups of people who have that same kind of pressure. So in general, like I mentioned, the legal profession is a very challenging and stressful one. And now with COVID, we have all these stresses, much more social isolation, much more uncertainty, people who are homeless or in danger of being evicted. The rate of domestic violence has skyrocketed. The rate of child abuse has skyrocketed. And similarly to the police, oftentimes the law is delegated the task of dealing with these huge social problems, which are all intensified again during the pandemic. So this is sort of the context of where we are.
Great. That was a lot, and I totally agree with everything you said. I've got, like you said, not spouting off too many statistics, but the study that came out that was very well known was a 2016 study. It's called The Lawyer's Path to Wellbeing, and they were actually shocked by the numbers that they found, and it was a very lots of people in the legal community, lawyers, active licensed lawyers that responded anonymously. And they found that 28% of them struggle with depression, 19%, and these are all like where it could be clinically diagnosable depression, 19% struggle with anxiety, and 23% with stress. And 3 times as likely to have a substance use issue. And then also they did a study about the same time on law students. And, part of my job is trying to be as proactive as possible, which means catching it early in our young lawyers. And then another part of my job is the reactive part, which is when they're already really stressed. But law students experience some level of depression. 17% of law students said they were clinically depressed. 14% experienced severe anxiety, so not just a general anxiety disorder, but severe anxiety. And then 6% reported serious suicidal thoughts in the past year. And so, when I give presentations, I give these statistics up front, but I always don't want to stay there long. I know it sounds doom and gloom, and I'm really not about, like we have talked about, pointing the finger and saying, you all are not doing well, and here's all the statistics that prove it, but really talking about being positive and talking about what we can do, what an individual can do, and what an organization can do to really lift each other up and connect and create a sense of well-being within that community, whether it be the entire legal community or an organization or company, a law firm that you belong to. But also I want to say that about 60% or a little over 60% of all lawyers in the state of New Mexico are in solo and small firm. So they're not with a big law firm. They may not be with a big state organization, but they are, they're in a law firm either by themselves or with a very small staff. And so, you had mentioned the social alienation, and some other characteristics, work addiction, sleep deprivation. Some of them are dealing with a diversity crisis at work. We tend to be heavy in the male population, lawyers and white male. I just gave a presentation or helped give a presentation on civility, and actually civility in the legal community is decreasing. We are becoming more incivil, more disrespectful, more humiliating each other. And like you said, there's a competitive nature to this profession. So that's all to say that it's not great. The characteristics of the profession. However, what I really like to focus on is how individuals can take care of themselves and how they can take care of each other, and really talking about a culture change too in the legal profession and what we need to do differently as an entire community. We have about 7,000 lawyers here in the state of New Mexico. What we all need to pay attention to and really in ourselves and in others to be healthier and thriving and not as struggling.
The Solutions Group, the State Bar of New Mexico's EAP provider, offers confidential and free professional counselors to support employees and their direct family members by offering short-term counseling, assessments, and referrals for any life struggle. This includes drug addiction, relationship conflict, anxiety, depression, and grief and loss. Other services include dependent care, crisis assessment and intervention, educational presentations, free well-being webinars, and an online stress assessment tool. Call 505-254-3555 or 1-866-254-3555 and identify with NMJ Lab to schedule an appointment or video visit.
So with that, and I know that you had mentioned this in the beginning, a lot of, you've had several legal professionals that have gotten in touch with you recently. Can you talk about what people often feel when someone in their professional community takes their own life? That is what we've been dealing with all over the state, actually, not just here in Albuquerque or in the big cities, but several people throughout the state have taken their own life. So what is it that those that are left, that are, what are they feeling? What would you say, and I hate to use the word normal, but what is normal? And what should they be doing when they first hear the news, and then trying to deal with and manage the grief afterward?
Thanks so much, Pam. And I want to pick up first on what you touched on, and the project that I created for the state. Instead of talking about suicide prevention, it's basically to promote safety and resilience. And that's the total focus that we want to look at. And what we also are really mindful of, that safety is first. And I think what Pam and I were doing when we were talking about all these cultural and systemic factors that weigh heavily on all of us in the helping professions, including attorneys and judges that have all this responsibility, is to understand that there's all these cultural factors that we have very little control over. So it's really helpful to be aware of that, so you don't feel like something is deeply wrong within you, and understand all these stresses and strains around us. Going a little bit further about the statistics, just to put in perspective, is that everything that Pam and I have talked about are by self-report. And we know that people under-report when they have difficulty. And again, when you look at high status groups of people, whether it's physicians or dentists or veterinarians or lawyers or police, to admit to anyone that you have these difficulties is, again, a cultural taboo. So even when we give these statistics about 20% or 30%, it's actually the tip of the iceberg. There's a lot more people who are suffering than will put it on a piece of paper. So that's something to keep in mind too. Going back to what Pam was talking about is when we suffer the loss of someone who takes their own life, there's been many, many studies, and in my own experience, I've been doing this work for nearly 40 years. And I'm in this position of supervising supervisors of people who are out in the field. So indirectly or directly, it's literally hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people that I've connected to over this time. And so I've assembled sort of a list of a lot of the kinds of reactions that you hear. I should have seen it coming, and I should have done something to stop it. How could they do this to me? Didn't I mean something to them? Why did they abandon me? If only I'd said or done something differently, they'd still be alive. It's my fault. How could I have been so clueless? How could I have thought that I knew somebody so well, and I didn't know that they were suffering as much as they were? Why didn't they trust me? Tell me what was going on. Let me help them. I thought that I meant something to them. Everyone blames and judges me for their death, as if I'm the problem. And then, what often is the hardest thing to say, why am I feeling so guilty? Because they're suffering, and my suffering from their suffering is over. So there's a whole cascade of ways in which people can take this. And you can see how it can lead people down the path of feeling very ashamed, very guilty, very blamed, feeling helpless, feeling unworthy, and feeling relatively hopeless. And another thing that's really of concern, it's called suicide cluster or contagion, when a bunch of people in a small community around the same period of time, weeks, and around the same area, it may be nationwide, but it may be within this limited time span, all feel suicidal or try to kill themselves or actually do kill themselves because someone else has done so. And when you look at high status, again, groups, it would seem like, well, why are those people so influential? But what I hear all the time, and I most often deal with youth suicide, is that the people who seem to have everything going for them and then kill themselves, a lot of people say, wow, that person was so loved, that person was so successful. And if they feel that desperate, what about poor, pitiful me? That's another factor for all of you, because the legal profession is held in high esteem. You have lots of power over other people's lives. You deal with very difficult and challenging, oftentimes life and death situations. And so when you look at one of your colleagues who may be very successful as a lawyer, may have a very prominent position in the community, may seem to have a wonderful family, and all of that might be true. But then for whatever reason, they feel so desperate and so much in pain, mental suffering, emotional suffering, that they feel hopeless. It's almost like getting a terminal diagnosis of cancer, where you feel that the only way to end your suffering is to end your life. When they take their life, you say, well, if they had all that support and all that status and all that achievement, and I have so much less than, how can I keep going? So that's another factor in why when one of us hears about someone in our own profession, it's there, but for the grace of God go I. But it's really intensified in this way. So all these experiences that I talked about, and you can see it can be in sort of different directions. Some people might be angry at the person who is suicided. Some people might feel like, why didn't they trust them and tell them that they were suffering so they could do something? They might feel angry. They might also feel very, very guilty. And so those are very common. And like Pam was very careful about, she said, what's normal, knowing that everything is normal for the person who's dealing with it, right? And so one of the things that I thank Pam for is typically a lot of times people will say, so in general, what do you think about so-and-so? And I always say, I want to know that person and what their relationship is like and what their community is like, what their spirituality is like, their culture, their customs. Everyone is unique. But in general, the loss of someone who takes their own life is usually the most unsettling form of bereavement that most people experience. And oftentimes, it's highly traumatizing for the person, whether you hear about it or not, or witness it or not, or see the body or not. It's so profoundly unsettling.
Yeah.
So going back to what Pam was talking about, what we hope to do today is just to briefly talk about when you know that all the coping that you have, all the supports that you have can't help you meet this challenge of dealing with that loss. How do you know that you're in trouble? And how do you know where it's safe to turn to other people? So typically what you'll hear from someone like me who's asked to do this is to talk about risk factors and protective factors. I'm not going to be doing that with you and with Pam. What I'm really going to be talking about is warning signs to you. And they're very specific. It may be that you have, like Pam alluded to earlier, you can't sleep when normally you sleep well. It could be that you're really irritable and angry with the people that you care about, and you lose your temper too much. It could be that you normally are a good, solid social drinker, and your alcohol is really under control, and all of a sudden it's not. So the first part of creating a way of planning for your own safety is to figure out when you are suffering in a way that you don't know how to manage and you don't know how to turn to. And again, it'll be unique for everyone. What I can tell you is that in very large studies of thousands and thousands of people who have been intensely acutely suicidal, the one issue that they mention the most is pain and misery in your mind. Just feeling like you have such intense suffering, so much hurt, so much pain in how you feel and how you think, that that's really a problem for you. Another one is feeling incredibly stressed. And in this case, stress means not just stress in a very non-specific way, but like, I've got to do something to stop this pain. I've got to do something so I can finally sleep. I've got to do something so I can connect to somebody else. The sense of urgency. And then oftentimes that goes hand in hand with physical agitation, feeling restless, uneasy, anxious, concerned. Then the other aspect, which has been shown to be really connected to people who end up feeling intensely suicidal, is feeling hopeless. There's no solution. There's no one to turn to, no magic pill to take, no relationship that will be healing, and then also self-hate. And I'm not just talking about sort of low-level worthlessness or self-doubt. It's really, I can't stomach myself anymore. I just hate the way that I am, the way that I treat myself, and the way that I treat and respond to other people. So all those feelings, when you start to experience that, as well as those physical behavioral things of being much more irritable and angry or sad or unfocused, and a lot of them will look like clinical depression and a lot of them won't. But it's not how you look at what means to a professional that you're diagnosed. It doesn't matter. It's what you say to yourself, I used to be able to handle this, I can't anymore. And that tells you that something is going on that you need to turn to others for. There's a framework for all of this that we call safety planning. And the whole thing is that it's really important to feel safe first, safety first. And there's all sorts of structures for safety planning for all of you that you can do totally on your own. There's even smartphone apps for that. One of them is called My3, MY3. They're all free. And they tell you how to identify your own warning signs and what you can do for yourself. Distraction is a wonderful way. Listening to music, going out in nature, doing mindless kinds of activities, whatever that might be, to pull yourself out of the negative space that you're in. It's not necessarily going to a happy or even pleasurable place. It's going to a neutral space. Even trying to remember, song lyrics from 30 years ago, but then you're not ruminating and dwelling on all the things that are troubling you. Then there's getting together with other people, not because you want to get advice from them or that you say that you're in crisis, just to go out and do a hike with somebody, going dancing, just talking about fun and mindless kinds of things, getting involved in binging on Netflix, just doing something to pull yourself out and reconnect to other people. It says to yourself that some semblance of life is going on. And on some ways, I am worth taking care of myself. And I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful that people will care about me. Then there are people that you can turn to say, you know, I'm really stuck. I don't know how to solve this issue. And you know that somebody has good kinds of experiences to share with you. They have wisdom. They have kindness. They have generosity and goodwill towards you. You can turn to them, your natural supports. If none of those things really meet the challenge of what you're trying to cope with, then there's a whole bed of professionals to deal with. Crisis lines, therapists, all sorts of peer supports. There's a whole umbrella of support that's out there. And the other thing that we understand is that feeling better is not feeling symptom relief. Feeling better is being in touch with your purpose and your meaning and your value, your reasons for living, your reasons for having a future. So it's not just sleeping better. It's feeling like I am worthy. I do provide a lot. I have a lot to give to other people. And one of the fortunate things for all of you, you're in a profession where you have a lot to offer. And we know that the best way for people to feel that they are safe and that they have some value is to give to others. And you have that capacity to really be of help to people who are in need. So calling on those skills not only helps those other people, it helps you too.
Thanks, Avi. That was, wow, great information. I loved how you broke it down in terms of you touched on what people might be feeling, and especially what they're thinking and what's going on in their head when they have somebody that has died by suicide. But then also transition into if you are struggling, here's all the signs that you might be struggling. So I think, you know, what I heard is please be aware. We're trying to tell people this is what you need to be aware of in yourself, and that you can help yourself, and here's all the ways that you can do that. And if those don't work and you still find yourself really struggling, then there are a host of professionals that you can reach out to. And so I really love all of the ways that you identified and broke down how a legal professional may be struggling, and then ways that not just legal professionals, but everybody should be taking care of themselves, and including, having an app on your phone that is your own safety plan, that we can create that for ourselves, and know that no matter how bad it gets, we've got a plan in place to take care of ourselves. So really great information. Thank you. Can you, I guess I want to talk a little bit about going back to when a lot of the calls I got when people had learned of a suicide is just really frantic. What do I do now? What are you going to do? Like some of the things that you said, Avi, was how did this happen? Or why did this happen? I totally can see how this a death by suicide is a very traumatic event, more so than, well, I mean, any other kind of death is traumatic too, but this one is especially traumatic for people. What would you recommend, or what do you say to those people that are frantic and don't know what to do, don't know how to make sense of this, really trying to process it and manage it? Can you give them some information on awareness, what they need to maybe pause and be aware of, and then how they can best move forward?
Thanks, Pam. Happy to do that. I do want to say that specifically, we always want to respect the surviving family's wishes about what information is shared. That's a really important thing. So when you contact, like Pam, if you've heard of someone else in the community and you want to get the specifics, she is going to be guided by what the family wishes to disclose. And I'm sure you understand that. The other thing about this is, again, the emphasis on safety and resilience for everyone, and how you promote that as opposed to looking at who's to blame, who caused this, what provoked this, because all those people surrounding those people who did take their own life feel guilty and blamed enough. The last thing we want to do is add to that. So that goes with any organization, is why didn't you protect this person? Why in the court weren't the colleagues aware of this? Why didn't, if you worked as a judge, the people who worked under you support you? So it's really important to more look at how can we best help each other, and if people are struggling, feel like there's a window of opportunity to get that help. One thing that I always like to cite is that there's a lot of myths around there about suicide, that people who want to take their own life won't tell anybody, and they'll try and try again until they kill themselves. Another is that society at large doesn't want to talk about it, doesn't care about it, looks the other way. And there's a lot of other myths that we have as a culture. When I ever have the opportunity to talk to anyone in the community about preventing suicide, I always like to start with a poll that a bunch of suicide prevention organizations nationally commissioned less than a year ago. And they interviewed hundreds of thousands of people and found out that 94% of the people interviewed said that they thought suicide can be prevented, as opposed to felt hopeless and unaware. And the same 94% said if they knew of someone who was in trouble in this kind of way, they would want to help, as opposed to turn the other way. So that's really comforting to know that if people are aware that you're struggling, rather than wanting to run from you or wanting to blame you for your own difficulties or think less of you, they actually embrace you and want to be of help to you. I always like to quote Fred Rogers, and one of his mottos was, "There are helpers everywhere." So I think that's one way of looking at it, is to think there are helpers everywhere that really want to give help to you. So part of it is saying to people that you can trust, I'm suffering in this kind of way, and they will let you know that you're not alone, and they will support you. If it's things like just meeting up to go out of the house, if it's making sure that you do something that's neutral or pleasurable or fun, if it's saying, you know, if you really can't sleep, I'm a night owl anyway, give me a call and let's just talk about stuff. Or even if you're socially isolated, let's see the same movie at the same time, or even dine by Zoom if we can't get together. But that is one way that's really important. And then one of the other things is to realize when what you're going through is really okay for you, that you aren't having difficulty coping, and that all these often uncomfortable feelings and ways in which you're reacting are okay. You don't have to be perfect. There's a lot of surveys, I understand, of people in your profession where perfectionism is sort of ingrained in you as part of law school. And you have to show that you are always on top of everything, that you're always the most knowledgeable, you're always the most skilled. And so this is the time to say, nothing is really perfect. It's what works for you. And if it means that sometimes you're going to be more testy with people than you would like, or tell people that you really can't concentrate and you need a break, that's fine. It's when all those ways of coping don't work anymore, and you're sinking more and more into difficulties that you say, I need something that I usually don't have.
Great. Thanks, Avi. We have just a few minutes left. So I did want to touch on this. When you were talking, we're talking about organizations. We have state-run organizations. We have, you know, some fairly large law firms, and then we've got kind of our solo and small firm. What are your thoughts on, I guess, when it comes to an organization, what can they bake in anything that is proactive in terms of the culture of the organization that can help create a sense of community, maybe a breeding ground for better health and well-being, people feeling connected, to minimize the struggle in the organization? So is there a way to bake that in proactively? And then also, what would you recommend an organization does reactively when there has been a suicide? Or really, I mean, any death or any big traumatic event?
Thanks for that opportunity to talk about that, Pam. It's very important to look at, because like we talked about earlier, there's all these cultural factors about the organization and society at large. And one of my immediate responses is, with the best of intentions, a lot of organizations all throughout the country have wellness kinds of initiatives. But oftentimes the wellness initiative is, we can be incredibly chaotic and messed up and stressful in our organization. It's up to you to exercise better and to sleep better and to have a better diet. We're going to give you the tools to do that, but you're on your own, as opposed to, how can we create a more nurturing environment? How can we create an environment that's safer? So I think what you're introducing, Pam, is that there are cultures that can build that sense of trust and safety and security and mutual cooperation and caring for each other, and not say, in essence, it's your fault, and so it's your responsibility, and we wash our hands of that. That's how you create a sort of a culture of safety and well-being, as opposed to sort of a wellness initiative. And you can do that in all sorts of the ways that you process things. So for instance, if something does not go well, let's say that in a case that you try, you made errors, or that there was some kind of issue, how to rehearse that with your colleagues in a way that's not finding fault with you and talking about the mistakes that you made, but what are the processes and the systemic factors that led up to that. So again, focusing on systems and cultures and organizations, not individuals. That's one way. Another way is saying that no path is right for other people. With the best of intentions again, a lot of times the tendency for an organization is to get someone like me to come in and say, okay, everybody, now let's talk about how you feel. Well, a lot of people will feel like, I don't want to talk with a group of people that I don't know all that well, number one. Number two, I'm actually, I think, coping with this rather well. I don't want to be in a position where I'm having to say how I'm struggling when I'm not, but I know that if I say that I'm not struggling, I'll be seen as I'm avoiding it, I'm denying it. And then there's other people who are really struggling, who, if they try to talk about it in any kind of public space, it'll actually destabilize them and stress them more. They'll be unguarding of their own security and boundaries and safety and be overly vulnerable and then be more at risk. So another way that organizations can help is just to say, here's all the ways that you can understand whether or not you are having difficulty. And here's all the space that we're creating for someone like Pam and her associates that you can talk to her. Here's hotlines that you can talk to. Here's therapists, if you want to see a therapist, that we would recommend that have some experience working with this kind of grief or this kind of depression or dealing with alcoholism or substance abuse in a way that promotes your recovery, connects you to your own spirit and your meaning and your purpose in life. That's what I hope that organizations will do. Again, with the best of intentions. And Pam and I talked about this at length too. A lot of times when suicide happens, especially in those clusters that I talked about, where a number of them happen around the same time, the initial impulse is, let's teach everyone about warning signs of suicide and what to do if we think that somebody might be suicidal. The problem with that is the people who are grieving are blaming themselves in the ways that we talked about already. Why didn't I pick it up? How could I have been clueless? Why was I so uncaring? Why didn't they let me know? Why didn't they trust me? Why am I feeling so angry at them for killing themselves? The last thing we want to do is intensify all of that. So that's why the thing that we can offer is, what does it mean to seek and establish safety for yourself and for the people you care about? How are we proactive in promoting our reasons for living and our safety and our resilience? And even when we talk to people, the tendency is to talk about all of the problems they're facing. As friends, as colleagues, even as professionals, what we want to talk about is the balance of that. So you're telling me these things are all difficulty. What's still going well for you? What are areas that you feel, despite how horrific this event was, you're still functioning well? What people are still coming through for you in ways that you could barely expect? People that you thought were bare acquaintances, and they're being so kind and so generous and so caring. Because what we want to demonstrate is we don't want to over-focus only on trauma and death and difficulty. We want to focus on the world is a complicated place, and as difficult as some things may be, there still are oases, if not whole areas, of caring and comfort and security and safety and positive kinds of ways of being.
Great, thank you, Avi. That was great. Gosh, there's so much to cover, but we're running out of time, and you've given us so much information. It is so helpful. So if people want to get in touch with you, how can you, are you taking new clients, and how would they do that?
So I'm at this point now where I'm happy to be a resource for all of you. And the best way to contact is my email, which I'll spell out for you. And I know that Pam will distribute that as well. It's my first initial A. My last name is Kriechman, A Kriechman, at salud, SALUD, .UNM, University of New Mexico, .edu.
Perfect.
Kriechman at salud.unm.edu. The other thing is, I shared this with Pam before we started recording this. There's actually an organization that was started by an attorney called Lawyers with Depression, all one word, lawyerswithdepression.org. It's a very wonderful resource. And as you all know, depression is a major risk for wanting to die or killing yourself. Another thing that's a real benefit to all of us in this state is the New Mexico Crisis Access Line, NMCAL, and their number is 855-662-7474. You can talk to professional counselors. You can talk to peer supports, people with their own lived experience, not professionals. You can talk on the phone. You can text. And also, they have statewide resources through the Department of Health and the Behavioral Health Services Division. So you can say, well, I'm calling from Albuquerque, but I have people that I'm concerned about in McKinley County. What's available for them? And they will give you that resource. So the New Mexico Crisis Line also has a website, and that is NM Crisis Line, nmcrisisline.com. So I've given you the toll-free number and their web link. And again, and this is wonderful for youth as well, because they often like to text instead of talk. And so they have text lines. Everything that you talk to them about, of course, is confidential. And again, if you're worried for other people and you're wondering about resources, they're a great way to find resources. One last group that I would say is that if you are struggling with surviving the loss of someone who has killed themselves, there are survivors of suicide groups, SOS, in different parts of the state. One of the largest groups, probably not surprising to you, is Metro Albuquerque. So if you just put on any web searcher, survivors of suicide, you will find support groups. These are all mutual support groups, and they also have referrals. So between all the resources that the state has and the lawyers groups themselves have assembled, and the suicide survivors groups, which are all people who have lost someone to suicide, who establish this connection, hopefully that's a starting point. And again, these safety planning techniques are available through a lot of smartphone applications. I find that the My3 is the one that youth and young adults especially like. One of the things that's really great about it is you can have the photos of the 3 people who you want to contact. You just press on their picture and you automatically get connected to them by their cell phone.
Very cool. Great. Thank you for all that information, especially thank you for your email address. And I also want to mention that I'll give you the number to NMJ Lab, which is 505-228-1948. And that is me that answers that phone. And you can call me. And then through JLab, every legal professional, staff included, immediate family members have access to our employee assistance program. And you can call that program and I just identify with NMJ Lab, and you have access to 4 free counseling sessions, and they can usually get you in within a very short amount of time. And that number is 866-254-3555. In addition, there will be a e-blast coming out from the State Bar of New Mexico that JLAP has put together, where Dr. Kriechman has provided us with resources, articles and books, and a YouTube video where he was the speaker in January of this year talking about this very topic. And so that is all going to go out to the entire state, to all the legal community in the next week. And in that, we will also highlight that this podcast is coming up, so everybody can have a chance to listen. And then we will also have something in the Bar Bulletin in the month of October. So lots of resources coming up in addition to what Dr. Kriechman and myself have mentioned today. You should be able to find something there that hopefully is something that will support you and help you. And then you have a lot of numbers that you can call as well. So Dr. Kriechman, I once again want to thank you so much for being here today, for all the information that you've shared, for your time in being with us today. And also a big thank you for the work that you do in working with legal professionals as well as everybody else. And on this very important topic, I will give you the last word today, sir.
Thanks, Pam. I just wanted to underscore the fact of how lucky you are to be in an organization that reaches out in caring and support for you. And as I mentioned to Pam, that is not always the case in professional organizations. And so, like I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of people who want to support you, among them certainly the State Bar, and we will do our best to be available to you and all those you care about.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you for listening. This episode was produced by the State Bar of New Mexico's Member Services Department and Solo and Small Firm Section. All editing and sound mixing was done by Blue Sky eLearn. Intro music is by Kevin McLeod at Incomtech. The views of the presenters are that of their own and not endorsed by the State Bar of New Mexico. Nothing